Thank you. And I think most folks on the line are going to get a prompt to proceed with that recording. The idea and the reason that we did this as a Zoom meeting was to give folks a bit more of an opportunity to share their own video and speak live. Right now, you're all muted while I give these introductory remarks, but then after, everybody will have a chance to ask questions. First quick tip, if you haven't done so already, and you're probably all full of Zoom meetings, but we wanted to share this one slide just to show some quick tips. The first thing we'd recommend is that if you haven't done so already, select the side-by-side mode and then select gallery view. And you can adjust the gallery view width to include as many people as you can on the right-hand side. If you're not sharing your video yet, again, we'd encourage you to do so. You can always mute your video if you need to during the session just by clicking the stop video button. Speaking of muting, as I said, everybody's, as they came in, given the large number of attendees we're expecting, everybody's muted on the line. But if at any time during the presentation you want to ask a question, you can ask it at the bottom of your screen by clicking the little more button at the bottom there. And going to chat and entering your question in the chat. Alternatively, you can raise your hand, or you can just go off mute and ask your question. If you do go off mute and ask your question, we would ask that you share your video, but otherwise you can chat the question to me and I can ask it of Dave. Only other thing here is that, as I mentioned, we're recording the session and we'll make the recording and the slides available to everybody after the session. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Dave Denaro. Dave is a vice president at Keystone Associates, and he's the leader of Keystone's Burlington and Nashua locations. Dave works with executives in career planning and transition, and he's coached hundreds of clients. And he's also worked as an in-house recruiter and an executive search consultant. Dave, it's my pleasure to turn things over to you.
All right, Sean, thank you. Let me get it so I can share my slides. Everybody can see that, I hope?
We can. It's coming through loud and clear.
All right.
And we hear you too.
Okay, thanks. All right, well, Sean, thank you very much. And I'm delighted to be back in front of you folks, literally, in front of your cameras or in your monitors somehow. We had a good session, what was it, a couple, 3 weeks ago on interviewing. And I think at that point, in the middle of the session, somebody asked a question that was more about negotiations than about interviewing. I opened my big mouth to say that that would be a topic for another session, and somebody took me up on it. And so this is that session. So I'm happy to be here to talk about negotiations. It's the typically the last part, maybe second to last part of the process for most folks when they're trying to secure a new position. It's the fun part, at least that's what I think, of the whole process. So I'm glad to sort of share my thoughts about it. Get to the arrow here, there we go. All right, so the objective of the session is this, and the objective of negotiations is to get the best offer that the firm can produce for the particular role you've been interviewing for. You're probably not going to be able to get anybody to pay more than they can afford. You're not going to be able to probably get them to give you a bigger title, more vacation, relocation than they have budgeted. So the purpose is to get the best offer that they can produce at that point for the job. And then the decision is yours. You are then in control. You can decide to accept because it meets your parameters, or you could decide to say, no, thanks. I think maybe I'll wait for a more senior role to develop, really like your company. Maybe I'll just wait for a more senior role. All right, so that's the purpose of, at least from my point of view for tonight, that's the purpose of, or the goal rather, of negotiations. There's only two things you need to know to do this. Normally I'm the person in Keystone that everybody kind of jokes about. I boil everything down to three things. I'm losing power today, so I've only boiled it down to two things. That's all I can remember for tonight. There's two things to do to prepare what I would call a market-based negotiations case. One is that you need to find out your value in the marketplace. Okay, so a number of ways to do that, but it's pretty essential. You'd want to find out, because most people, when they think about negotiations, think about salary and bonus, what the people call cash compensation. So that's pretty easy data to come across with a little bit of work. You'd also, in general, want to know other things that other companies are offering in terms of the other elements of an offer. What are some companies offering in terms of vacation? What are some companies offering in terms of work flexibility? Doesn't have to be an exact match to the company you're interviewing with. You just want to know what the market bears for the different things that you might see as part of an offer. Second thing is, I would say, theoretically easier, but it's in reality the hard part. And that's that I would implore you to try. Okay, I don't see everybody's panel in front of me, but if I asked a quick question, so we'll do an informal, non-technical poll. If you've ever negotiated an offer before, would you raise your hand? Okay, so again, I can't see the whole panelists here, but there's an awful lot of folks that haven't. And we see that at Keystone sort of all the time. There's reasons for that, or people think that it's rude. People think that they'll lose the offer. People think that they'll seem ungrateful. They're scared. There's a whole variety of reasons. I'm telling you that if you're facing those reasons yourself, just remember this fact. You may be negotiating for the first time in 2 years, the first time in 10 years, the first time in 20 years that you've done this. The HR person or the manager on the other side of the equation, this could be the second or third time today that they've done it. Companies negotiate all the time. It's the individual who is, fairly rarely shifts job, is the one that's out of practice. All right, so I implore you, there's the way that I'm going to coach you to do this, the way that we're going to go through constructing a market-based case is going to be very polite, very considerate. You're not going to be in danger of losing an offer, so please get it in your head that you will try. Don't want you to be one of these folks that falls behind the market because the company was expecting you would negotiate. You didn't. And they weren't about to say, well, never mind. Let me add another 5,000 to that offer. All right, so only two things to do. Let's dive right into the first thing. First thing is to grab your market value. I'm going to give you three pretty good sources, pretty much in order of what I would consider credibility. So let me say at the offset, we're not looking for exact numbers. We're not looking for exact figures at all. I am more concerned with the credibility of the source than the precision of the numbers. Credible source number one, agencies. Agencies or search firm, depending on which one you're using. Which one you use depends on what salary level you are commanding in the marketplace. Typically, search firms, if you were looking for a position 225, 250 and above, typically placement agencies, that level and below. That's a very rough cut. But the point would be, if you're seriously in the market and looking for a job, running a job campaign, agencies should be part of your campaign. A number of agencies should be part of your campaign, not just one or two, because they all work with a handful of companies, literally, and you don't know which companies they work for. And so you need to get to quite a number of them. As you reach out to them, I'd like you to ask one question of that, at least one of them. And the question is, what are you placing people like me these days? Agencies are the cutting edge of salary data from your point of view. They know when the market's going up, they know when the market's going down because they're at the leading edge, right? They see the offers from both sides. They see what what candidates get and accept, but they also talk with the HR folks or the managers to see what the range is, what the range they were recruiting in is. So they are the bleeding edge of the marketplace. They will give you a really big range. Since most people I know never negotiate an offer down, they only negotiate it up. The only thing I need you to remember is the top end of the range. So if they say, gee, anywhere from 100 to 200, I'm sorry, I can't get any more precise than that. You would say, ah, that's very good. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Because all I need you to remember is the 200. Okay, when you talk with
Dave,
yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Oh, one quick question for you. You mentioned that split, the 2 to 250 and up is typically search firms. Is it ever appropriate to ask the search firm what the range is, not for the role, but for typical roles, you know, in that space?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I would. If you're just reaching out to them to say, I'm on the market, want you to know, you know, what my capabilities are in case you ever get an assignment, that's a perfect time to ask the question. Realize that if they've called you about a role, if you ask them, not surprisingly, they're going to kind of tell you the range for that role, right? Because now they've engaged you, they have a chance of making some money with you. So that's
right.
Pretty much what's going to happen.
And we just got a question from Joe. Any difference between contingency and retained agencies in terms of their market perspectives?
Retained are the search firms that work off a retainer. In other words, they get paid to actually do a search. Contingency, the only contingency, they'll all, like a school of fish, they'll all go after the same job. The only one that's going to get paid is the one that actually represents the candidate who accepts an offer. The rest of them won't get a dime. So the contingency people are the ones that work, you know, like 200 and below, and the retained typically 200 and above. And that's a very fuzzy boundary. You can find search firms and agencies that work, you know, on either side, but that's just a general rule of thumb.
And Dave, do you see any differences in what a retained versus contingency firm might share in terms of their perspectives on the market? Or would they be roughly the same?
Again, when both of them, when you're engaged with them in discussions with a particular company, they're pretty much going to keep you within the range they know that company is willing to pay, right? They're getting paid by the company. They're not necessarily an agent for you. They should be nice to you. They should be polite to you, but they're not working for you. They're working for the company. The company is the one that pays their bill. To complete the transaction and get full payment, somebody needs to accept. So the better time to ask the question is when you're putting yourself on the market for the first time. There's no reason for them to hedge their answer. There's nothing in play. You would, you know, that's when you would say, what are you placing people like me at these days? Got it. Okay.
And do they typically answer? Sorry, I hate to, but
no.
Are they typically open to answering?
They'll usually give you a big range. Yeah, they don't want to be held precisely to it because they never know what assignment in the future would bring in terms of a hiring range. But they'll give you typically, it'll be pretty big. But as I said, the good news is you only need to remember the top end. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Hi. So my question on that is, if they're employed by if they're being paid by the employer,
yep.
Are they then? Why would they try to get me the highest pay I can get?
I'm not sure that they would.
Ah.
Yeah, it's up to you to get the highest pay that you can. They might be the conduit. You might, to get some of the awkwardness out of, you know, asking, you know, your potential boss, they might be the in-between, but you're the one that's running the show here. They're not going to, they will do what you ask them to do. They might give you some advice, but remember, they know both hands here. If this was a poker game, they're looking over both people's shoulder. They've been told what the absolute top end is. They know the offer isn't there. They know what you want because they've asked you. They're giving you some guidance about, yeah, we could ask for this. No, I wouldn't ask for that. So you can listen, but at the end of the day, you're the one that's running the show. That's what I would say. Okay, they're one source. They're a really good source because of the fact that they're the leading edge of the market. Second source, friends in human resources. All right, so let's go back a little bit. Your offer from any sizable company is going to be developed by the compensation folks. The compensation folks get their data from surveys that they've purchased or participated in. So the HR people know the survey data that they're using to base the offer on. If you know HR people, I mean, literally know them pretty well, your friends, here's what to ask them. Given the title of the job that you're thinking of, I'm assuming obviously they're not in the company that you are interviewing with. That would be awkward. Give them the title and ask them to look at their Hay or their McLaughlin or their Mercer or their Roland or whatever other survey that they participated in, and ask for the third and fourth quartile for the range of that job. So ranges for the job are divided in 4 parts, quartiles, right? So then there's a midpoint. Generally speaking, if you're newly promoted to that level, if this is your first director of client services role, you used to be one of the people that worked in the department, you're probably going to get somewhere in the first, maybe maybe a little bit over the second quartile, right? You're going to get lower in the range. You got some solid experience, just to quantify solid, I'll say 5 years experience. You're probably going to get somewhere around the midpoint. If you are more experienced than that, you should be getting more into the third quartile. Companies are loath to bring people in off the street into the fourth quartile. That's where their superstars for that role kind of exist. People pretty much bet in a company that within a few weeks that you're there, somehow your salary is going to get out some mysterious way, and people are going to be very upset if you're junior, you were just brought in and you're making the same or a little bit more than they are. They've been there for years, getting good review, stellar review after stellar review after stellar review. So the job range for the job is sort of in the survey data and in the comp's mind. The hiring range might be narrower than that. They might not want a super junior person. So they want someone with a few years experience, but maybe not too experienced. And that's going to put you pretty much in the middle of the range somewhere. So when you ask your compensation friend, what's the range, ask for the third and fourth quartile. That'll give you the midpoint on up. I'm going to assume everybody in this call is a very good performer. I'm going to assume you've done the role for a few years. You've been getting reviews that say that you're excellent at it. So yeah, why should you be in the middle of the range? You should be in the upper end of the range, reflective of your performance. So second,
Dave, we got a question from Paul and Paul Thibodeau. I don't know if Paul, you want to expand on it a little bit more, but Paul asked about the expectations that might be created if one reaches out to connections and asks for advice on comp when it's beyond the first interview, but it hasn't involved any discussion of dollars with the company that's hiring. Did I get that right, Paul? And if you want to unmute, it's lower left side of your screen.
Yes, essentially just expand is, are we creating expectations by, reaching out to connections, and are they going to expect that once you're hired that you would hire them for a future search, for instance?
Good question. I don't think so. I mean, I guess it's all how you pose the question, but this is a friend in HR of yours. So if you said, Sally, hi, it's, whatever, long time no see, how you doing? I'm in search mode myself. And I was wondering if you could do me a favor. Could you look in the salary survey data you have for director of IT and let me know what the third and fourth quartile is? So again, I'm assuming you're not interviewing with that company. So she's just sharing data that is not confidential data, because if you want to be really clear, you're asking for the survey data that they purchase. You're not asking for employee data. That would be, you're not asking for a person's salary. You're not asking for their employee salary data. You're asking for the survey data. It's public information. You could buy it. It would cost you anywhere between $50,000 and $100,000 to buy a survey these days, but it is, public information. So all you're asking is for that job, third and fourth quartile, And again, I'm assuming that the person you're asking is not a company that you're interviewing in, at least at this time. So I don't think it sets any expectation that, you know, they should be looking at you.
And Dave, are you suggesting to ask for the survey information from the compensation person at the hiring company, or
No.
is it at search firms, or is this, I just want to make sure I've got that clear.
Yeah, not the hiring company. That would be a little awkward. But it's anybody
Right.
you have a friend in any company that let's call similar industry that you have a friend in. All right. So if I worked at Fidelity and I'm thinking about just to throw names out there, and I'm thinking, gee, I might want to work at the Fed, or I might want to work at BlackRock, and I do have a friend at Putnam who in compensation, I would ask my compensation friend who works in Putnam if they'd look at the purchased salary survey data that compensation undoubtedly has.
Got it.
Okay, it's just a source of information. Third source, online material. Online material, there's good, like anything else online, there's good and bad. Remember what I said before, I'm more interested in the credibility of the source than I am in the actual precision of the number. So I'm going to give you two sources online that I think are pretty credible. Salary.com is one, because I believe salary.com is actually old surveys. So they were done with some rigor. They were done with compensation folks who understand what salary is, bonus is. They understand all the terms. They slot all the information into the right buckets. Here's the issue. It's free because it's old. And by my way of looking at it, it's probably 4 years old, 3, 4, 5 years old. So you need to age that data. The market has moved 2.5%, 3% every year for the past 3, 4, 5 years. So I would add 12% to the numbers that you see on there. So you go on, you throw in the title of the role that you're kind of interested in, put in the geography stuff, and it'll give you a number. Add 12% to that number. It'll be good enough for ballpark standards. Okay. And again, the reason I'm picking that is because I believe that it's been collected with some rigor. Second site, Robert Half is commonly known by most folks as the accounting people, the accounting agency. They're actually an international placement firm that works many, many disciplines, and they do a survey every year that they publish. So right now, the Robert Half's 2020 salary survey is out there. That is a good enough online source. They do it with some rigor. It meets all my criteria. Again, if you did all three of them, you're going to see that the upper end of the range starts to cluster, right? What the agencies tell you, if they say 200 and your friend said, gee, the upper, the 75th percentile, the upper end of the third quartile, that's the 75th percentile, that's around, 180. You see the Robert Half salary says 190, 195, something. That's close enough, right? That's in the ballpark. That's what I meant by clustering. Okay, you're going to see some trends just looking at those three sources. I'll give you one more online source. And I'm sorry, I gave it to you. It was Robert Half. Yeah, so you got salary.com and you got Robert Half as the online. Do not bother with Glassdoor. Do not bother with paychecks.com. Do not bother with any site that says, yeah, I'll tell you your salary data. First, put your title in here, the one you currently have. And okay, put what you get paid right now. Put your salary in right now. See, that kind of site, that's collecting data on the fly. That's using your data, throwing it into a pool, and regurgitating out to the next person it asks. That is not reliable. I don't know if there's 2 people in that pool, 200 people in that pool, 2,000. It's not done with any rigor. If I said put your salary in, would you put your base in? Or would you put your base and bonus in? Because that's total cash. Who knows? That's the problem. It's not done with any rigor. And the big, big problem is the recruiters that you're going to negotiate with, they know that. So we don't want to use a source that they know is not credible, because now your conversation will revolve around the credibility of the source rather than your market value. So it's kind of a red herring. It'll take you off track. And there's no need. Here's your 3 sources right here. Okay. All right. understand the company's game plan. We've actually touched on this a little bit. Any company that's of any size, more than 50 people, they go to the market to do what's called benchmarking. So they look for certain jobs that are pretty common across their industry, and they do survey, or they buy survey data for that kind of job. When they have jobs that don't fit one of those benchmarks, they do things called interpolating. So my first little picture here is them collecting data. Second is only certain jobs called benchmarks. Then they interpolate the others. And why do I even mention this? Because you're going to need to do the same. You may find the title for the job you want is not in the survey data, so you need to interpolate. It's just a fancy word for pick something that's close enough. Scale and scope are what the compensation people look at. So if it's the similar level in the organization, VP, let's say, great. If it has similar major responsibilities, has $1 million budget, and it has 5 reports, great. And that's a similar enough job. All right. So the only reason that I mention this is that, you know, when you look for your salary data in some places, you're not going to find data in your exact job. Don't let that stop you, because it's not stopping the companies. They're still going to come up with a range for that job based on interpolation. Okay. So
Dave, we've got a great question from Katie Mack about the split between equity and cash comp.
Yep.
Are there any sources that actually give any insights into equity and how you'd negotiate that, especially for startups?
Yep, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. How about that for the equity piece? And the equity piece is actually fairly complex. Right. So it's not I'm not trying to generate another seminar here, but there's a little bit into that. I would Google that, and you're going to find a lot of consulting firms that give you a pretty decent overview on the breakdown, rules of thumbs, you know, whether it's really literally a startup versus you being the 40th person in versus you being the 80th person. I mean, in some cases that all has a bearing on it. People that are the first ones in the door take the biggest risk. They usually get more equity. People that are 50th person in, 70th person, less risk, things rolling along, they usually get less. So it's a difficult question to answer right now for me, to be honest.
Dave, the one other source that I've seen that can be useful is either private equity or venture capital firms. So if you have a friend who's at a venture capital fund that invest in the same sort of stage, right? Stage, you know, Series A, Series B, whatever, that they'll often have a pretty good sense for the kind of equity they give away for at least for the senior executives on the team.
Yep. Okay, so with that aside, usually what we're talking about here is a more standard offer of, you know, 6-page offer letter. First couple of pages are really the things to negotiate, and it's not heavy on the equity side. All right, so when you can negotiate, I want to clear this up sort of right off the bat. There is one time when you can negotiate salary, and it's not at the beginning of the race. All right, so that's my racer. He's on the start line. You are going to get hit with a money question early on in an interview process. We covered that last time. I think that's what sparked this whole thing about negotiations. That is not a negotiating point. That's a screen. They're trying to toss you out of the process because you either make too much or you want too much or you want too little. So they figure you can't be qualified enough if you make that little. So it's a screen. You want to treat it as a screen. It's treat it as a pass-fail test is what I said in the last session. You just want to get close enough where they can say, yeah, okay, that's sort of in the range. And then you never want to talk about compensation again until they push an offer across the desk. Okay, so there's your screen. They'll have some questions. Now, for those of you in Massachusetts and some other states, and I can't recite the list of them off the top of my head. In Massachusetts and other states, it's now illegal for the recruiters to ask you, what have you made? That question alone went a long way into keeping people underpaid in some cases. So now they've twisted the question a little bit. The question will be, what are your expectations? What are you looking for? Okay, that's a screen. My best suggestion here is talking in first of all, try to deflect. Geez, money is a part of my equation since I'm not independently wealthy, you might say, unless you are independently wealthy. But I'm really more interested in the job and the work and the caliber of colleagues. And geez, you know, Fidelity, I know you pay well. I'm not that worried. See if you can wordsmith your way through it. If you can, if they say, well, that's good. I'm glad you're more interested in the job, but we got to make sure that, you know, it's even worth talking to you. You know, can you give me a range? Give them a really big range. And then say, are you somewhere in there? Like, gee, 100 to 200, somewhere in there? Are you in there somewhere? They will say, yeah, well, we're more in the 140, 150 or something, whatever they say. And then I would suggest if it's anywhere in the ballpark, not the section, not the seat, but literally Fenway Park, Camden Yards, just the ballpark, you should say, yeah, let's keep talking. It's just a screen. You're not going to be held to it. Okay, so there's your screen. And the time when you want to really make this market-based case is when they push an offer across the table, either verbally or in writing. So it's going to be at the end. At the end, they know that they love you. At the end, you have leverage. In the beginning, they don't know you. You're one of 5 people, one of 6 people. You have no leverage. So don't try to negotiate in the beginning. Okay. Okay, elements of an offer. People always think, as I mentioned before, that offers, we're really just talking about money. Most offer letters these days are 4 to 6 pages. I would suggest that the first page, maybe page and a quarter, there's an awful lot of things on there that are negotiable and worth negotiating, not just base and bonus. So first page and a half, it's gonna say, we are pleased to extend an offer to you as, it's gonna give you a functional title. It's then gonna say as a VP, that's your corporate title. Both of those are negotiable. It's gonna say, we're at a base salary of this with a bonus opportunity of that. Both of those negotiable. Maybe it'll say long-term, negotiable. It'll say you report to so-and-so. I've seen that negotiated. It will then talk about things on the other side of the teeter-totter here that are typically not negotiable. It'll talk about you'll be eligible for our wonderful healthcare package. You'll become rich from our 401k program. Neither of those are negotiable. If they have Blue Cross Blue Shield, you're not going to get them to do Vanguard or somebody else. If they contribute 4% to the 401k, you're not going to get them to contribute 6% for you. Okay. It'll talk then about vacation, that's negotiable. It'll talk about relocation assistance, sign-on bonus, perhaps, we'll come back to that. And the only piece that's in the rest of the next 4 pages, which are non-compete, non-disparage, non-this, non-that, non-everything else, I would take a quick look at the non-compete to make sure it's not outrageous. All right, Massachusetts is pretty, relatively speaking, employee friendly. So it should be something like 6 months with a direct competitor. It shouldn't be 5 years, any company on the face of the planet. That's way too broad. They can't prevent you from making a living. But usually the things that are on the side of the teeter-totter that, usually the things that are negotiable outweigh the things that aren't. Okay. Now, some of the things, and we'll talk about this a little, have double duty. Some of these things are worth negotiating. For example, corporate title. VPs usually get different bonus opportunities. They may get different vacations. So some things you get, double bang for your buck, so to speak, to negotiate. So we'll chat about that in a little bit.
Hey, Dave, we did have one question come in from Jeff, and it was related to a conversation that he'd had with a headhunter who asked him for his current compensation as well as his previous compensation in his last role. Now, granted, you just shared and reminded everybody that it's illegal, but how does one sort of, handle that? You're not necessarily going to tell the headhunter, hey, you just broke the law, but do you have any tips or tricks for how to keep it going, since you mentioned that that's often a screen?
Yep. So let's assume that it is in the state of Massachusetts. There's a tiny bit of gray area. I thought by now that it had been resolved that agents act as arms of the company, so they shouldn't be asking either. But let's say that you're just introduced yourself to the firm. There is no job, and they kind of want to know, sort of where you are. Humor is a good diffuser of tension in any meeting. So if you were able to put a big smile on your face and say, look, I'll tell you what range I'm looking at. I don't want to get you in trouble. I don't want to see you in jail. I don't want to see you carted off. You could use a little bit of humor to say, in Massachusetts, I know that's not the question you wanted to ask. You wanted to ask what I'm looking for. If it's out of state, they do have a right. If it's not a state that has that kind of law, then they can ask. You could say, this is what I made. However, my market research says that if I find that I've been considerably underpaid for a while, and so this is what I'm looking for. Okay. So
yeah, that's a nice response as well. And Jeff clarified that there is a current job, and the headhunter is on retainer, and said that the employer wants to know what his past comp was, which sounds like the employer is trying to skirt the law by having the agent do the dirty work.
Yeah. That's exactly what it sounds like. So you could say, look, I don't want to get anybody in trouble here. Let me tell you what my expectations are.
Right.
In the old days, particularly for commissioned work, they would ask for your old W-2 and such like that. I don't think anybody in Massachusetts is doing that anymore. Now, lest you think they're entirely powerless, after you're hired, they could ask. Okay, because you've already been hired. But I don't know anybody that does. All right, let me get my cursor going here again. All right, so I mentioned before that I want to coach you tonight to make a market-based case. So what I mean by that is a case based on what is in the marketplace, not a case based on the old you. Not a case on what your old title was, not a case on what your old salary was, but a market-based case. That's what you want. You want to keep up with the market. What I'd like to plant the seed, or have you plant the seed with the people that you're negotiating with, is that if they can't get you at fair market value, they're not going to get anybody of your caliber, right? That's leverage. Okay, remember, they're making an offer to you because you're the finalist. You're the person that they absolutely want. They don't make two offers. They don't make offers to three people at once. They make it to the person they want first, try to close that person off. So you're the one they want. You have some leverage. So we want to have you think about all parts of the offer, not just money, when we are negotiating. And my cursor disappeared here. There it is. All right. So those
Dave, one other question. You mentioned relocation in that prior slide.
Yep.
Do you ever advise your clients to negotiate the exit on the back end as well? In other words, a lot of times employment is at will. Right. And so it's all well and good if a company offers to fly you and your family across the country and it costs $40,000. But if in 3 years you don't like the job or the company isn't what you thought it was and you want to move back, do you ever see that become part of the negotiation? If I leave before X years, pay for me to return?
Yep, I will say yes. I've seen it. I would say you could do it. I'll give you a qualified yes. You can do it. If the role is risky, everybody acknowledges it. It's a turnaround situation. The cash situation's not very good.
Yep.
And they're transporting you across the country. Yeah, I would negotiate a career transition program with your favorite Keystone job coach and severance. Right, and you can do that because it is a risky situation. And the way you would do it is simply to say, look, I want to ask for one more thing that you and I hope never costs you one dime, because we hope it never gets triggered. But for my peace of mind and for the ability of my family to trek all the way out here, if I'm released, for anything other than criminal behavior in the next year or two, I want a severance program and and a severance amount. And whether you say on top of that relocation back, or you just build it into the amounts, up to you. Okay. If it was the best company, if it was Amazon, if it was a great company and it's a great role and it's a promotion for you, I wouldn't, because that's showing that you're sending a signal to them that I'm really concerned this is going to work out.
Thank you. And what about temporary relocation, where, you know, like a lot of times you see executives now that are willing to sort of be on site 5 days a week, but fly home on the weekends?
Yeah.
Do you ever see that become part of the negotiation?
Pre-COVID, yeah. Nobody's flying very many places these days at all. But yeah, you know, they do temporary for 30 days, 60 days while you house hunted and move and store your furniture. And that used to be a pretty standard package. I don't know if it's very standard these days, but you can certainly ask for it. It's again, this might be the first time you've done something like this in 5 or 10 years. They get this every week, right? So you're not going to be asking them something that they haven't heard. They'll have an answer for you. But I would at least
Thank you, Dave.
Goes with my first smile on your face and ask. Okay. So negotiations, back to this slide here, really step one for making a market-based argument takes off from where we left off in interviewing. So if you hung in with me for that interviewing seminar that we did a while ago, I said interviews always revolve around 3 buckets worth of information that you're going to exchange with people that you're interviewing with. Delivery is one bucket. They need stuff done. They want to know if you've done that stuff before. That's the can do it bucket. Motivation, I want to do it. It's exactly the kind of things that I'm looking to do. And I love the mission of your place. It really would love to back that. And boy, what a great fit I'd be. I talked with so many people in the interview process and we got along so smoothly. So the step one is I would nail the job down, because you are going to push a little bit when they give you an offer. I would nail the job down by starting off with, I'm delighted to get an offer from you. I was hoping to get an offer from you. I can do this job. I really want to do this job, and I think I'd be a great fit. That's step one. Step two, probably should have told you in the beginning, this is a 3-step process. So there's step one. You do it once, never have to do it again. Okay. Step two is you're going to start to bring up the issues that bother you that you saw in the offer letter, right? I would use the word questions. That seems to be the word of the day. They'll give you an offer. They'll say, we're going to send you an offer in a few minutes. Look it over. Call me back if you have any questions. Meaning, again, from the people that do negotiations every day, call me back if you have any questions. Meaning, call me back if you need things, if there's things here you want to try to negotiate. I would pick up on that word. And I would say, I'm delighted to get this job, to get this offer. Can do it, want to do it, will do it. However, I have a few questions if you have a moment. So I would, first of all, love to have you do this verbally, like person to person, not in writing. So you literally would call them up. Okay. Step two is when you're going to list your questions. So as I said, that diagram before, all the different things that could be something you want to negotiate, whether it's base, whether it's bonus, whether it's title, whether it's whatever, I would get them in some kind of order in your head, and I'd ask for the most important ones first, or ask about the most important ones first. There's a term in negotiations, it's called resistance. That means the other party is going to tell you to stop. You can't go any further. I'm not going to do anything more for you. I don't know when you're going to hit resistance. You don't know when you're going to hit resistance. It might be after your first request, might be after the 7th request, who knows? But I don't want you to hit a bunch of trivial things first, then they say stop, and you say, oh, no, wait, but we haven't even got to salary yet, and that's the most important thing, because you're kind of cooked, right? So put your asks in order.
Speaking of that, Dave, we got a question about someone getting an offer to come in and restructure a division, knowing that, you know, after the restructuring is done, that there would likely be a departure, you know, let's say after 2 years. How would you advise your client to sort of frame the discussion then? Is it all about is it the salary, the sign-on bonus, or a potential parity, assuming that everything goes well, given that you know it's of a more limited time horizon?
Yeah. Geez, that's a good question. I'd have to give that some thought. If I could put that aside for a moment and
Sure.
dwell on that as I speak. I'm capable.
I'll come back to you, Dave. I'm not going to let you escape without
okay,
answering.
Good. Thank you.
So, okay.
Thank you. Okay. So we've done step one. We've nailed the job down. I said I'm delighted to get this, but I do have a few questions, and then I start asking my questions one at a time. So you can hear different points of view on this. You'll hear some people say, give them all your questions all at once, because you don't want them to think that they're going to die, by a million cuts, so to speak. That you will ask for something and then ask for something else and then ask for, and then they never know what it ends. I tell you, as you said in the little bio about me, that makes tells you a little bit about my background. I used to work as a recruiter for a really long time in a variety of capacities. I'm going to tell you that based on that experience, my approach would be to ask one question at a time. Because if you show all your cards and say, geez, the title and vacation and salary, I think that most people you're negotiating with will pick the easier things to give on. The harder things they'll hold the fort on and then tell you, hey, come on, I did a little bit for you. So I don't think that gets you as far, and it's my opinion, but I don't think that gets you as far as bringing these items up one by one. So
are you suggesting that?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Are you suggesting to sequence them in order of your personal priority then?
Yes.
Is that how you would sequence them?
Yep. I call it line item negotiations. One item at a time, most important one first. So let's pretend the first one was base salary. You think it's a little low. They're offering you 100. Your salary, your research and your expectations are more like 140, 150. So you might say, first of all, I love the job and blah, 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 all of that. First, I have a few questions. And they say, great, what are your questions, Dave? And I might say, geez, well, I guess my first question has to do with base salary. I see that you're offering 100. I have to tell you, I've been in the marketplace for a little bit and I've done some research and I've been watching things. The market seems to be paying a bit more for this scale and scope role. Would you have any flexibility on that number? So my second step is to bring up the issue. My third step is what we call the ask. And I would say round one through all this, your ask should not be a number. It should be the word flexibility. That's the best word of all in negotiations these days. Seems a little low based on what I see in the marketplace. Would you have any flexibility on that number? All right. So I'm using one line to do an actual negotiation, the wording you could use, the whole bit. Let me go a step further. I'll tell you what you're likely to hear these days. There's a very small possibility, and I've seen it happen, but it's very remote, that they'll say, well, yeah, Dave, there's, I mean, this is an offer. Of course, there's a little bit of negotiation. If we made it 110, would that do it? So in other words, they just throw money at you. Not likely to happen. I've seen it, but I wouldn't call it the highest probability response. Equally low probability, they're going to say, no, Dave, I'm sorry, nope, can't do one thing. They never say take it or leave it anymore. I notice they say best and final. That's our best and final, they say. Low probability for that. Here is what they're going to say, and this is beautiful because this wraps everything that we've been talking about together. They're going to say, gee, Dave, our compensation people really put some work into these offers. They do a lot of their own research, and they say that this offer of 100 is pretty solid. It's pretty fair. I don't know about you, but if fair, solid to you represents high end of the offer, raise your hand. Because it doesn't to me. Fair offer, solid offer means right what it is, a 50th percentile, middle of the road offer. Okay, if you're a better performer than that, by virtue of your reviews, by virtue of the fact that you know your brand, you know your reputation, then you should say to yourself, I got them. I got them. They gave me an average offer, now I'm going to push. So if they say, what have you been seeing? Our staff put this together. They do a lot of research. They say it's pretty solid. What have you been seeing? So they're going to call you. They want your information. That's why you can't bluff, by the way. And here's exactly what you do. Say, well, since I've been running a search, I've talked with a number of agencies, and I've always made a note to ask them, what have they been placing people like me at? They say high end 180, 170, 180, 190. I also have some friends in HR, and I asked them what the 75th percentile was, what the 3rd and 4th quartile of the range was. They said, yeah, pretty same thing, at 180 to 200. And I even checked the Robert Half salary survey, and even there, a similar job in scale and scope it seems to be coming in at 175 to 180. So that's where I'm seeing the marketplace now. You can see how I would think your 100 is a little low. Okay. So there is, from beginning to end, for at least one line item, how it would start. Thank you for the offer. I'm very excited, blah, blah, blah. I do have some questions. Sure, what are they? Raise your first most important question. In this case, I used base salary. And I phrased it as, in the marketplace, I see this, your 100 or whatever I said, 150, I'm forgetting now, seems a little low. So I'm using fairly gentle language. Seems a little low, seems a little light. Would you have any flexibility? Didn't even turn around with a number. I wouldn't advise you to turn around a number. So if you said, gee, because we all get a little nervous in this situation, see, I was going to ask for 150, but they offered 130. Maybe I'll drop my 150 to 140 and ask them that. You'll do that in a nanosecond, right? Well, if they could have gone to 150, they're going to jump all over 140 if you said a number rather than the word flexibility. Okay.
Dave, we had a question that came in related to negotiating consulting rates versus salaries. Any differences in approach, or would it be the same sort of market-based approach?
Same market-based approach. You just need to know what your value in the marketplace is on an hourly rate or a consulting rate. So maybe another question we can hold to the end, because it's different than this. But same thing, seems a little low. Marketplace is paying 200 an hour, 175 seems a little low. Would you have any flexibility? Same basic mechanics. Okay, all right. Where is my arrow? Disappeared. Okay, flexibility. There's my little icon. I love that icon. Flexibility, burn that in your head. That's the word you want to use. Would you have any flexibility? You would just rinse and repeat. By that, I mean you go down that list of concerns you had in the offer. So base was a little low, market shows this, would you have any flexibility? You say, well, it's, you know, I don't think we can get to 180, we might be able to get to 140, 150. You'd say, great, that seems fair. Hold that thought. My next question, you're gonna go to the next thing. My next question is corporate title. No, my next question is bonus. Would you, I see you're in the 10% bonus pool. Would you have any flexibility on that? Market again says that for this level role, more like 20% pool is out there. Would you have any flexibility? Vacation, you're offering 2 weeks vacation. In the marketplace these days, you can find companies that give unlimited vacation, 5 weeks vacation right off the bat. Would you have any flexibility with that 2 weeks? Right? So I'm just reciting the same mechanics. Market says this, would you have any flexibility? Market says that, would you have any flexibility?
And Dave, is that all in a single conversation, or is it typical to go back and it's no, one conversation?
One conversation. You'd say, thank you. Now my next question is, thank you, I have another question. So you're just gonna ratchet down, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. You want it in one conversation. So I do agree with the folks that say nobody likes someone to keep going back. You know, they think they got it done. They go to the boss. The boss says, okay, they come back to you. Okay, that did it. But now I want something else. Now I got to go back to the boss. By the time you go back to the boss 2 or 3 times, the boss is likely to say, look, clearly the person doesn't really want this job. You want to do it all in one conversation.
Got it. And you had pointed out earlier that the importance of sort of going through your own priorities, but once all of them are out there, yep, and assuming that they're going to answer the way you said that they were going to answer, which is You know, they're not going to immediately just say, yes, here's a whole bunch more money, or yes, here's some more vacation. How do you keep them on point in terms of your priorities when the phone conversation ends? Because it's entirely possible that the person you're negotiating with goes back to the boss and only gets or asks for the easy stuff. How do you keep them focused on the things you care most about when you finish that conversation with them as you're finishing?
Yep, good question. So let's wrap the conversation up. So let's say you went through salary, base, bonus, vacation, the things that bother you. Not everything in the offer is going to bother you. So just the things that do. You've been saying, hold that thought, oh, that's great, thank you. My next question is, okay, great. Some of them, they say they'll do something. Some of them, they say they won't do anything. Some of them, they'll say it's policy, there's nothing we can do. So you just want to get an answer to each of your questions. And at the end, either you'll make it through your list or you will hit resistance. In other words, they'll stop you. They'll stop you by saying, and you say, so I have one more, you'll have another question. You'll say, look, Dave, I got to tell you, I know you said this was a good job and you were really excited and you'd be a good fit. There now seems to be so many things that have to change. I'm wondering if this really is a good fit, right? So that's resistance. A recruiter, the agency in between you two, will be more blunt. They'll just say, Dave, if you ask for one more thing, I think you're going to blow this offer up. So I wouldn't. So they'll be blunt. So you'll know when you hit resistance. When you hit resistance, you have one more thing to do. Recap. You'd say, no, I didn't mean to give you that impression. No, this is a very good offer. So let's recap where we are. If you can do the 140 base, if you can do the 20% bonus, you just recap the things that they agreed to. And your leverage is, what I'm going to propose that you say is, if that can be your new verbal offer right now, I will give you my verbal acceptance right now. Okay. That allows the recruiter, the HR person, to go back to the boss once and say, so I delivered the offer, but it didn't work. She wants this, she wants that, she wants that. If we can do that, and I think we can, I think that's within our range, you'll have a new employee, you'll have her. Okay. That gets you away from the, well, won't they ask for one more thing, or how do we know we got them? You have to tell the recruiter, if you do that, you got me. That's your big leverage. That's your big lever. Verbals to verbals aren't any kind of legal binding agreement. What it does is tell the recruiter, is allow the recruiter to be on your side now, the HR person to be on your side. Go back to the boss and say, look, we went in with an average offer. She's really good. She probably does deserve a little bit more of this. It's not outrageous. We can easily do this. Why don't you give me the okay? I'll reformat the offer to look like this. We'll get her and we can move on with business. Okay. So you want to recap it with that phrasing.
And Dave, recognizing that all companies are different, are there any themes that you're seeing in the marketplace right now in terms of things that are easier for companies to give away? Like, is it that extra vacation? Are there things that, like, if you're indifferent and you actually like the offer that you're getting, but you just wanted to ask for one more thing, are there any things that you're seeing that are, you know, in the marketplace that are easier for companies to be flexible on?
Things that don't cost them money, right? So if you ask for a functional title, you're an accountant and you want to be a senior accountant, that's a little bit of prestige, but it usually doesn't affect your salary or your bonus eligibility, something like that. Vacation is a weird one. I have this slide here that says special situation. So let me hit that separately. But anything that doesn't really cost them too much, or anything that doesn't come out of the comp line. So a sign-on bonus, for example, doesn't come out of the compensation budget, comes out of a separate budget with agency fees, usually a lot of other things. So they could add a little as a one-time hit as a sign-on bonus, and it doesn't affect the comp, they call it compression, how close you are to other people that may be more or less experienced than you. So anything that doesn't hit their comp line is something usually that you might have some headway for, but I don't want to step away from base comp and bonus. You want fair market value for the work that you do. So I wouldn't use any of that as a substitute without at least asking about the core things. So I mentioned corporate title as a special situation. Let me give you a sense of how to handle that. So if it's a AVP, most titles in corporations, most positions in corporations straddle at least 2 corporate titles. They bring you in at a lower one, that way there's some headroom to promote you. So they bring you in as an AVP, they can promote you to a VP a little bit later. I would rather have you have that now than later, just like I'd rather have you have the money now than later. So corporate title is a pretty interesting one. Some people would say, I don't really care. Here's why you should care. Because it affects a lot of other things. So if you can move corporate title from AVP to VP, you might be in a different bonus pool automatically. Don't even have to negotiate it. You might be in a different vacation plan or health plan automatically. It's got that kind of follow-on effect. All right, so I said make a market-based argument. How do you make a market-based argument for corporate title? Here's how. Here's what I would say. It's the line item you want to negotiate. So you say, I have another question. They say, what is it? They say, well, corporate title. You're offering this role as an AVP. I have to tell you, now that I've been through your 52 interview steps here, I get a good feel for the job. The scale and scope of this job is pretty big. And the constituents that you'll have me in front of, shareholders, high-level vendors, these are all VP, SVP, EVP people. I'm afraid that as an AVP, the person in this role is going to be walked around. You know, you're going to end up fielding more questions. The person in this role won't be as effective as they could be. I think to get this role done the way that I understand it needs to get done, the person really ought to be, the role ought to be a VP level role. Would you have any flexibility making this a VP titled job? So I went out of my way to get the word I out of that explanation. I tried to convince the recruiter or the manager, it's in your best interest to make this a VP level. Do you see how I was trying to use the market-based concept even in something that's fairly personal like corporate title? The scale and scope, the people that you would interface with, if they're all several levels above, I would bring that to their attention and say, there will be fewer people walking around me to get to you if this was a VP level right off the bat. So if it's in the manager's best interest to make you a VP, you have a better chance of getting it. If you say, you know, I was a VP, it's really going to hurt to go back to an AVP. Can you make it? That's all about you. Doesn't hold the same weight for them. Market-based holds weight. Personal view, they might give it to you because they want you to be in the right frame of mind, but it's not as, it doesn't frequently happen as much. There's a word for that that's escaping me at the moment. But it doesn't happen as often as when you make it all about them. Okay, vacation policy is another one that's funny. A lot of times people will try to negotiate that. The HR people will say, no, that's policy. CEO came in last year, got 2 weeks vacation. I'm sorry, we're working on it, but that's all we can do. There's no discretion. Nobody gets anything different. I tell folks, when you run up against policy, don't argue policy. Go with it. Say, okay, policy, so 2 weeks. Let me think. My family and I were used to taking 4 weeks of vacation every year. When do I get to 4 weeks? Oh, 5 years. Okay, go do a little math in your head real fast. 4 weeks, so let's see. So I'll probably be taking 2 weeks unpaid every year for 5 years. 2 times 5, that's 10 weeks. How about a sign-on bonus worth 10 weeks of pay? I didn't argue vacation policy. I monetized it. I got a sign-on bonus. I stick it in the bank. And if I am going to take the 2 weeks vacation, see what I implied is I am in charge of my own life. I'm taking 4 weeks vacation. Always have, always will. Rather than take it unpaid, how about a sign-on bonus? You will get that every time because it doesn't affect the vacation part of the offer letter. Sign-on bonus. They're not trying to hold sign-on bonus to any kind of policy. They're trying to hold vacation to a policy. So don't argue. Monetize it. You can monetize a decent number of things.
And are there any rules of thumb in terms of sign-on bonuses relative to the overall compensation? 10%, 20%?
No, I haven't. You usually get a sign-on bonus for something that you're leaving on the table or something that's missing. The companies don't usually just give out signing bonuses for the heck of it, unless they need to be competitive. There are times in certain hot jobs where it's just the competition is so intense that it's just a de rigueur, it's just a part of the process. But outside of that, you have to show that you're missing something. Relocation, they say, well, I'll relocate, to go back to the person that had the relocation. They might say, no, we don't have any of the 60 days in house hunting. We give you a standard 25K, use it as you want. You do some quick thinking. I got 4 kids, I got 2 antique cars, I got a pet boa constrictor. I'm not gonna get them all to the West Coast for 25 grand. So you sign on bonus. You know, if they say, do you have any more? Can you do any more in the relo? And they say, no, that's policy. Then don't argue policy. Go to the well, go to the sign-on bonus. It's all money. It's all in the same, it's just money in your pocket. It doesn't matter what the label is. All right. One last thing. If the divide between what you see as market value and what they're offering is really pretty big, you know, 20%, 25%, 20%, 30%, 40% gap, I would add one thing to your ask. So and they say, well, what are you looking for? And you say, well, I appreciate the 140 offer, but the market, I mean, people are telling me the market's 200, 210, 220. At least that's what I'm seeing from agencies and the survey data and such. Now, let me be clear. I'm not demanding 220. I'm just asking if you have any flexibility with the 140. So when you have a really huge gap, if you want to hedge your bet just a little bit, add that line in. If it's 10K different, 20K different on a 100K jobs, I wouldn't add that line in. I just say, geez, the market seems to be 120, 130, 140, you're at 100. Do you have any flexibility? But if it's really big, I might add the one line in to say, just to be clear, I'm answering your question. What have I been seeing? I'm not demanding 220. I am asking if you have a little flexibility. Okay, so those are my special circumstances. Now, at the end of the day, they give you the best offer that they can give you. They might say no to every single thing you asked, but at least you have some comfort in knowing that's the best offer. You're not going to find out 6 weeks later that they could have done better. You just didn't ask. Right? I've had people that have done that. I've had people in HR that have done that. And they have data, they have access to the data. Once they get in there and they realize, oh my God. And a particular person went to the boss and said, you got me from a real bargain. I see what offers we're making now. And the boss said, yeah, you didn't ask. Okay, so even if they say no, 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 now it's your decision. You like the role, you like the people, you like the place, it can further your career, it's a reasonable offer, you should feel good about accepting. If those things are missing, yeah, you'd have second thoughts, but at least you know. Okay.
So do you ever, what was the movie, was it Cyrano de Bergerac, where he had somebody else do the talking for him? Do you do this for people, Dave?
Yeah, the little Mission Impossible Tom Cruise thing. I got a little earbud.
Yeah, exactly.
I do that. Yeah, no. I actually did have a case where a person got a call as we were meeting. They got a call, got an offer as we were meeting, and they were saying things out loud, and I was jotting things on the piece of paper. So that's as close as I ever got. That was kind of funny. Okay, so honest to God, that's it. 1, 2, 3. You need to be prepared. You need to try. All right, and then you need to line item negotiate against the marketplace. Love it. Market's showing me this. Would you have any flexibility? 1, 2, 3. And 1 gets done once and never again. And 2, 3, it's 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, until you either hit resistance, they tell you stop, or you make it through your list, recap, and say, now let me think, if we do this, 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 and that, if that could be your new verbal, you got me. Okay? That is it. It's not any harder than that, honest to God.
Dave, thank you so much. We've got a couple more questions I'd love to try and squeeze in, if that's okay.
Okay.
First one is back to your point about the scope of the role and the corporate title. Do you see any differences when it's a brand new role? In other words, it's something that's just been created in the company, and they're calling it a director, but it's really a vice president. You know, how do you bring up? Is it the same sort of methods? If it's a new role that's like not as common, there's not as much of a market for that particular role yet. You know, 5 years ago it was, you know, someone doing social media maybe, or, you know, like any examples there where there's not a strong market-based argument, but your gut tells you that the scope on this really seems bigger.
Yeah. That's a really tough question. I wish I had a super good answer for you, and I'll admit that I don't. I would use interpolation. So I would say, look, you know, the kind of company that you want to be, this would be considered a director's role. So would you have any flexibility to get it there right now? Again, startups, there's not a lot of uniformity to how startups do things. If everybody's going to be a VP, regardless, then everybody's going to VP. They're not going to make you an SVP or an EVP just because, you know, so a 5-person brand new out of the box, just starting is, you know, frankly, if you ask a question like that, they'll probably, you'll diminish yourself in their eyes. They want somebody that's excited about executing this mission, not about titles. So, but let's say it's not exactly a fresh startup. It's something that's been around for a couple of 3 years. It's got 50 people. Yeah. You might use the, I know where you're trying to go, and in that kind of role, this would be a VP. What do you say? Why don't we get everything in shape right away? That's my best answer. I know it's not a fabulous one, but.
Do you mind if I just asked a quick follow-up, because that was my question?
Sure.
This is Vita. Thank you so much. This is one of the best seminars I've seen on negotiating salary. It was so practical and so full of great tips. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Just about that question, like, it is a new role. It is not a startup. It's a publicly traded company. The role responsibilities are still ambiguous. I think they started thinking they could hire a director level to complete the job. Even in from first to second interview, it's clear that I think they're getting clearer about what the job is. I guess I'm wondering, I agree, like, to not bring up offer considerations while you're going through this process, but say you're really close to the end and you pretty much are thinking you may be getting an offer.
Yeah.
Do you think it's appropriate to say, like, is this still at, you know, would you consider, you know, this type of level for this job in order to bump all of those other things before you get the offer?
Yeah.
Or is,
so my answer, and again, it's probably a range of people that have done things, and they'll tell you, no, I did this and it worked. I'll tell you what I see as a coach, and my personal opinion is I wouldn't. I would not jeopardize getting that offer. I would get the offer.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Yep.
Okay. At least now you're in control. Right. And there's I don't see very much upside to bring it up early, other than, you know, you can not worry maybe about one thing, but I would get that offer. It's the same thing in you know, not that this is exactly on target. Well, maybe it is. I don't know. When you're negotiating sticky questions, you want to ask a question. It's really pretty sticky. I always coach my folks, get the offer, then ask. All right. Typically has been around maternity leave. I advise all my clients, you get the offer first, and then tell them, look, got to tell you, I'm going to be out for a while. I'm going to be on maternity leave for a while. I don't want to crush this company, but I want to make sure that you're okay with it. So I would ask that question, however you're going to ask it. Some people don't even bother asking, which is fine. But if you have a mind to ask, you would get the offer, then ask, not before. And this happened once before. I worked with a woman that read some pretty nasty things about women in senior management in this particular company. So she waited till she got the offer, She was a very senior SVP level type person. Said, I have just a couple more questions I want to ask the CEO as I decide. And then she asked him. So this, you got 4 women on Glassdoor saying pretty nasty things. What's behind that? What's that all about? And he proceeded to denigrate the women. It's their problem. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. She said 4 women, really? All 4. Not made up her mind. She didn't join that company. But if she had asked that earlier, she might have never been in the spot to get the offer. You might say, so what's the difference? She didn't join. The difference is in my head. She controlled the situation. She was the one that chose not to join. She wasn't told you're not getting an offer. That's a big difference to me. Keeps you in control.
Dave, any advice in terms of men and women and negotiating styles? If, for example, you know that the person you're going to be negotiating with is a woman and you're a woman, obviously you could have a 4-box matrix for this, but are there any tips and tricks that you have just in terms of negotiating styles? And I know this is just very, broad brushstrokes, but anything that you see there in terms of your work with clients?
In terms of the actual, I think you use the word technique or mechanics, 0 difference. You would do the same things. I'd be silly if I didn't say it would be perceived differently. So guys are competitive in negotiating, and women, if they do the same thing, often are really hard-nosed or really pushy or something like that. I'll go back to what I said before. Smile on your face, watch your words, and do it. Male or female, just do it. So the mechanics, no difference. But yeah, that's the world we live in. I'm not oblivious to that. It might be perceived differently, but do it.
How about situations with public or union positions where there may be a lot more constraints, like a teacher or academia? Any cases where you've worked with clients there where you've had to help them navigate some of those extra constraints? So
people that work in a unionized place but are not unionized themselves, get an offer letter, employment at will, everything I said stands to the best of my knowledge, thinking through the few people that have worked like that. Yeah, union is completely different. You don't negotiate, your union negotiates for you. I don't have that much experience with that, to be honest. That's probably the sum total of what I can say around that, but I don't think you have any latitude. I don't think you have any latitude personally.
So I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 more questions. The next one is, and this comes back to how you had talked about, taking vacation time that you don't get paid for and moving it into a sign-on bonus. A similar question here is around internal equity. So, the reason that they come back to you with is others in your same range are making less money, therefore we can't pay you as much. What are some of the responses to that? Is it that, well, actually maybe the job should be higher titled, or what are some of the ways when they cite internal equity as a way to negotiate?
I'd go back to the market. I'd just keep referencing the market. You're not their comp people. You're not their CFO or CEO. You can only do what you can do. The fact that they have a compression problem or they have a pay issue, paying below the market, I would say is their problem. I know it's easy for me to say that. You probably really want the job, I would imagine in this case, but I would stick with the market, right? I can't see what your other argument would be. Well, okay, so you're going to underpay people, but I want to be the best of the I want to be the best of the underpaid people. I don't see, that doesn't strike me as a winning argument. I'd stick with the market, and then if they don't meet remember, I'm keeping you in control. You might not like the control. You might not like the thing that you need to do, which is turn it down and look for something that pays more fairly for the work that you're delivering, for the impact that you're delivering. But at least it's your choice. We
just got flooded with a bunch more questions. If you could answer this notion of, the typical advice is you should be pursuing multiple opportunities at the same time, right?
Yeah.
To try and bring those to offers around the same time. So do you have any advice on how to sequence things so that you're getting the most out of the company that you prefer? In other words, do you try and get the less important offers first, or the one that you really, really want first? And in a case where you've got, let's say, 2 offers, we just got a second question that came in, the one that the person wants pays less, but that's the one they want. Do you ever recommend to your clients to use a competing offer as evidence of the market? Or, how do you have them, do you ever have them introduce that information?
Yeah. Okay, so there's a couple of questions there. I'll try to tease them out. But I think I'm losing brain power here, so I apologize in advance. It doesn't come out exactly right. So yes, you want to get competing offers up. I think we touched on this in interviewing a little bit. You don't start to try to get offers out of people when you get one offer, because these days they won't let you. They give you a short leash. I remember saying last time, they only give you a couple of days to think about things. So when you're heading into finals in one opportunity, you use that as leverage in all the others, meaning you would call up some of the others to say, look, I got to tell you new information that I think you would want. I'm going into this other place. They're calling it finals. I really, really like what we've been talking about here. Is there any way to accelerate the process? Okay, so first bit of control you have is to give them information in enough time that they can do something about it. So when you're going to finals, that's when you want to think about all the other places that you're in process with, and the ones that you really are seemingly pretty excited about. You want to get to them and say, is there anything you can do to get on the horse here and get this process going a little bit faster? Because I don't want to be in an awkward position where I have to decline a role only to hope to get an offer from you. By the way, you would never do that, but you can say it. Okay, so first step is get them all, get the ones that you want charged up. Second point that I'd make is an offer from anybody is great leverage. I would add it to the data. So I would say, look, I've been in the marketplace, these agencies and my friend in HR and this, and I actually have got a couple offers that are at this rate. So you could add it to the data, okay? If you have a weak company, like a third place, remember how we all tiered schools? So if you have a safety school that's coming up first with an offer, that's not one you would try to accelerate. The minor pieces of control you have, if they said, all right, well, we want you to come in for finals because we're really high on you, you'd say, great, when would you like me? And they say, oh, Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. Well, pick Friday. Like delay, procrastinate, delay, push that one back while you get the others that you like more to go a little bit faster, okay? But once you get offers from one, yeah, you could mention to the other that you have other offers. They're definitely going to ask you what's the other offer. I don't think there's any harm in saying, particularly if it's above what you're looking, at or above what you're looking for. So I don't know if I hit the 2 or 3 questions that you wrapped in there, but getting an offer is a good thing, good thing, and it's good leverage.
And again, it's not inappropriate to mention. It's not inappropriate to mention. So one other question here is one of our attendees said that they've had a conversation with a headhunter where they've asked about the range, the comp range, and the headhunter has said the company will pay whatever's necessary for the right candidate. Your advice earlier was don't really push on this until you get to the final stage. But as a candidate, your time is valuable too. So how do you sort of scope it? You base it on the reputation of the company that they're not going to lowball you. What are some of the ways you tell your clients to make that decision as to whether or not to move forward?
If one of my clients heard that, I would tell them that's awesome. Because I'll take them at face value. I know your time is valuable, but this is an investment in your future. And obviously the compensation is a big piece of not only the future at work, but the future of your life, right? You springboard off of each offer to other offers to other offers. So I would say it's worth it. You don't want to say, I don't want to spend another hour with you until we nail down this money thing. That's short-sighted in my book. If they say we'll pay whatever it takes, you should just say awesome. And don't bring it up again until they push an offer across the table.
Okay, so we have one more minute before the top of the hour, and I think I'm going to tee up the last question now. If I missed any, we're going to share Dave's information after the session. But last question, Dave, is what if you're in a job you already love? You've already negotiated your salary. You've been in it for a little while. And let's say you're performing really well. Do you have any advice for someone who finds out that, you know what, maybe I should be making a bit more? Like it's negotiating while you're already in the role. Any tips there?
Yeah. Okay. So step number one, don't talk yourself into negotiating once you're there. Don't say, all right, this is low and I don't even want to be bothered talking with them about it. I'll prove myself and they'll give me a raise later. I honestly don't see that happening too many times. You're already in, they already have you. You're in the 2% pool, 3% pool, 4% pool. If it's a 4% comp pool for the year, to give you 6%, they have to take 2 away from somewhere else, right? So don't trick yourself in negotiate. You can make the biggest jumps when you're jumping jobs, usually bigger than even when you jump internally, usually. So again, another request to steel yourself up and do good negotiations as an offer. But once you're in, I will go back to my friend, the market. If you find through different sources, not just one, not just a friend, but through a variety of sources that, no, you know that I'm not getting paid what the market's gone ahead. The market can move faster than a company can. So I don't mean to say that companies are all bad. Sometimes the market for a particular skill set can move awfully fast, faster than the company can do yearly increases on. So if you find yourself in that spot, I'd collect my market data. I would tell my manager in advance, way in advance of comp season, that I'd like to talk about it. Okay, here's what I mean. If your company delivers your increases at the end of the year, they're budgeting and planning for those increases, honest to God, probably in August, maybe July, August, September. If you in November think, oh, I got to talk with my manager because this December I want a really good increase, you are way too late. It's already made. The money is allocated. You have to go 6 months at least before when your reviews and your money gets distributed as increases, to tell your boss, look, I want to have a conversation about compensation because I know 6 months seems like a long way away, but I want to give you my perspective on things. I would plan it. I'd let them prepare for it. Then I'd come and I'd say, it's a simple conversation. I'm doing really good work. Do you agree? So we want to make sure that your brand and the perception of your brand is A-okay. They're going to say, yeah. You say, okay, here's what I've seen in the marketplace for this kind of role. I'm not demanding anything. I know salaries are 6 months away. I just want to tell you, my expectation is that you'll bring me closer to market. You'll bring me to market, or at least very, very close to market. Now you've given your manager enough time to get their argument together, to do their lobbying, to get more money in the budget rather than stealing 0.5% from 5 other folks. You've given them a chance to do it. So yeah, you can negotiate in, but always think 6 or 7 months in advance at least.
And maybe we should do another one just on this, Dave. But I do want to thank you so much for taking the time with our group today. We had some fantastic questions from the audience, really great engagement, and your material was certainly thought-provoking. So thank you so much. On behalf of our attendees and the MIT Sloan Boston Alumni Association, I'd normally give you a gift. You already got one the last time, but we'll probably send you another just for fun, so you'll have 2 batteries. For everybody on the line, thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the discussion. We've got some great virtual events planned over the coming months, including on August 5th. We have our next, if we could, Tina, mute everybody else, that would be great. We have our next Women in Wine Wednesdays at 6 p.m. And then on August 12th, our next CIO digital learning series is going to be taking place. And that's leading the post-pandemic enterprise. And we're working right now to schedule our fall career series events. And we would welcome, you can reach me at Sean, S-E-A-N, at sloan.mit.edu. That's my alumni email. If you've got suggestions for particular topics, you can also enter them here in the Zoom chat. And do feel free to share your feedback here. But we're also going to have a feedback survey that we'll share, and it would be fantastic if you could fill that in. And again, visit mitsloanboston.com for all the latest details. So thanks again to everybody for joining. Thank you again, Dave, for being a frequent flyer with us, and hope everybody stays safe and healthy and has a wonderful evening. Take care.
Thank you, Sean. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dave. That was great.
You're welcome, Tina.
Tina, please save the chat just in case there were any other.
Yep.
Awesome. All right.
No, we still have a lot of people on, huh?
Do you want to move us into private session, Tina?
I will end. Hold on.
Just move us into a breakout room, and I think we, please.
Okay. Hold on. It's not that easy to do. You know, I've never done it before, Sean. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I don't see breakouts on mine either.
No, I've never done that, but people are, sorry.
We're down to 7 folks anyway.
Yeah, I can do that, but here, I can do it. I got it.
Yeah, thanks, Tina.
Are we in a room?